Okay, so we're now being recorded. Cynthia is going to be my primary moderator. Hopefully everybody had a chance to see her little documentation on how to use this interface in terms of the little purple menu at the bottom and the chat area. What I plan to do is, because I've got a lot to cover and I'm not entirely certain of the timing, is you can put in questions in the chat area, but if they're in any way substantive that would sort of take me off off track, I'm going to just wait until the end to answer them all. But feel free to put them in there just so you don't forget them. And if there's anything that's sort of more administrative in nature, you can chat to the moderators rather than chat to everyone, and hopefully Cynthia can help you out through the chat box in terms of like audio problems or anything like that. Let's see. Oh, I've got a slide deck as well as live Excel spreadsheets to show you. The slide deck I've kind of designed to double as my script, but also as a reference guide. So there's going to be lots of formulas in there, and some of which I'm not going to explicitly demo with each slide. But the idea is you're going to be able to come back to this. My plan is to share the slide deck itself, as well as all of the Excel spreadsheets that I've set up as samples for this, to share with all of you. So if you want to, for instance, if something goes a little too fast and you want to play it back later, you'll have the recording, and you can use the recording in combination with the slide deck and the actual live slides to experiment for yourself and try things out and follow along with the recording. So that's kind of the idea we've got in mind here. We're going to try to ask everybody to stay muted and use the chat box if you need to communicate, again, like primarily with Cynthia for any technical administrative problems. Just wanted to also point out to you, and I don't really have a way to, ironically, to share this with you, but over at the top left, the very top left, you've got the main menu, and that's where you do things like leave the session. And below that, I'm hoping that you're all seeing another little icon that if you mouse over, it says show view controls, and within that gives you some power to resize things, the shared screen relative to your overall browser window and so forth. Cynthia, is there anything more you'd want to explain about that?
No, we're going to gather all the questions towards the end that you're putting in the chat. If it's something specific that that is important right at that point, not necessarily important, but that can be quickly answered at that point, we'll probably answer it at that point. But otherwise, if there are questions, as Melissa said, that might take us longer to explain, that could be held till later, we're going to hold those questions to the end, and so we can make sure we get through the whole session. So if you have a question, send it in chat. You can also raise your hand. That's a button at the bottom as well beside the audio in the video. If you would like to ask a question specifically and don't have the ability to do the chat and only audio, but otherwise we prefer if you put the questions into the chat just because it will make it easier for everybody. And like I said, everything will be available on the CAAL website, the recording, the slide deck, and the sample spreadsheets for you to use later on the CAAL website, and I'll send out a message when those are up. That's it.
Okay, great. So let's just get started. Okay, so I'm doing this on two screens so I can watch the presentation and actually do the presentation. So, okay, so we need to get started off with some basic vocabulary so you know what I'm talking about, and people aren't entirely consistent across different tutorials and things. So a spreadsheet, technically the term spreadsheet refers to the entire file, and you'll often see terminology like book and workbook in Microsoft's documentation. So spreadsheet is the same thing as workbook, which is the same thing as book, which is the entire file. And that's distinguished from the individual tabs or sheets inside a .xlsx file, which are called tabs or sheets or worksheets, and those are the individual sort of tables, you know, with the A through Z columns and the rows down the you know, 1 through whatever down. Something else I should say at the beginning is of course Microsoft keeps changing things with every version, and in fact I found just working on this presentation between my office computer and my home computer, both of which are ostensibly running Excel 2016, but some things actually look different between them. So depending on what version of Excel you have, some things may look different, but everything I show you should be available, I believe, at least as far back as version 2007, certainly 2010. I just threw up this little bit of information just to give you a sense of, you know, hard-coded limits. Usually, unless you're trying to put your, you know, your MUN or DAL and you're trying to put your entire catalog into a worksheet, you probably aren't going to hit most of these limits. Okay, basic best practices. So I'm going to start at the file level. So always, 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 wherever you got your original data file, and typically, most often, most people I know are interested in counter reports and as well as other kinds. So you're downloading or getting emailed to you files from vendors. Always consider the one you first got from the vendor as your original data file. Create a folder structure where you, of some sort, where you keep the original data files separate from the ones you're going to actually edit and do all the things I'm going to show you. And I highly recommend naming convention, and I'm giving an example of something I do with counter reports. Is I start with some Taylor and Francis TNF, some kind of abbreviation of the vendor name, which I'm very consistent about, the abbreviation, and the word counter is distinguished from other kinds of report from that vendor. And then in the case of counter reports, I use the counter official abbreviation, JR1, the journal report 1, and the year that so calendar year 2016. The second line is showing you an example. You can come up with whatever works for you, is a naming convention where the copy that I make starts with some other letter, ideally something at the beginning of the alphabet, so it'll come, you know, at the top, and think in terms of how you're going to look at these in whatever folders you're having. So I like AN for analysis, or you could, you know, C for copy or whatever. Just even a 0 and a space would work to have it file up at the top in your file manager view. I recommend that you put it at the beginning and keep it short. So depending on how big your file manager is, you make sure that you're not accidentally ever editing your original, because that's right at the very beginning of the file you know to look for. Okay, so that's the managing the files itself. Now let's start opening the files up. So, or actually we have to export them from the vendor in some cases if you're not getting it just from direct wherever. You often have multiple choices for downloading or exporting data. Very often you'll see things like HTML, tab separated, or TSV, CSV, comma separated. Sometimes they'll actually offer Excel as a choice. Sometimes it's also things like JSON and XML. I'm not even going to deal with those. I'm really focused on these. I recommend tab separated values as your first choice if that's offered. Second choice, comma separated values, and then only third choice if neither of those are available, just Excel. And I explain here why. If they've done a true Excel file, often they've done fancy things with the header that's just going to get in your way and just adds an extra step of getting it out of your way, which I'll also talk about in a moment. Tab separated is the cleanest in terms of the fact that tabs are never in your data. I've just never seen any collections related usage data, anything like that, that ever has tabs in the data itself. So it makes a very clean import into clean columns. CSV is usually clean, but I have seen cases where something gets just slightly mangled and commas in the data start messing up the columns, and so TSV is usually the cleanest. And sometimes, by the way, when a vendor claims to have an Excel download, what it actually is, even if they give you the file name with .xls or whatever, it actually is a TSV or CSV file anyway, and you'll usually figure that out once Excel starts saying weird things about editing it and saving it. Also, TSV, tab separated value files, are very often named .txt, which is totally fine with Excel if you happen to use Google Sheets. And by the way, almost everything I'm going to be talking about here today also applies to Google Sheets, which is the environment I actually work the most in, except that Google Sheets will treat a .txt as a document file, not a spreadsheet, so you have to actually fix the extension to TSV if you're importing into Google Sheets. But Excel will you open up a TXT and it'll see that it's got tabs in it and it'll handle it properly. Also, finally, when exporting data from a vendor, I've noticed increasingly some vendors with counter reports are giving an option. I don't know how well you can see this, but I'm actually, this is the screen snapshot of where you would download reports, and I think this one is from MathSciNet, but Taylor and Francis in particular does this a lot. They give you the option to select multiple counter reports. That's that part 2, select reports, and the first checkbox, select all reports, and then JR1, JR1 GOA, and so forth. I call that a trap, because if you do that, what you're going to get, and this is what I'm about to show you here, is a single Excel file with a single tab, a single sheet. It'd be really nice if they gave it to you as an Excel file and all of those different reports were in different sheets. That would be great, but that's not what they give you. What they give you is this. And as I scroll down past the first list, so the first list is the JR1, and when I get, oops, I went a little too far, when the JR1 ends with line 700 and something, suddenly I'm looking at JR1A. And so this is a complete nightmare. This is, you can't sort on this, you can't run formulas on this, you've got a bunch of different tables all smashed into one sheet. And you end up spending a lot of time editing these out, copying and pasting these giant lists into your own separate tabs anyway. So I find that it's easier to just go back to, when you're doing the download function, do them one at a time and have them emailed to you one at a time separately anyway. That'll save you time compared to having the amount of editing you're going to do in a spreadsheet to break them all apart afterwards. So there's that. Okay. I'm having just a little, there we go. Okay, so when assuming you have a TSV or CSV file, you now have 2 choices on how you're going to open it in Excel. One is from your file manager, and I'm going to throw something in here directly. So here I am, and I'm in the Windows environment, by the way, but it's, you know, the equivalent in the Mac. You know, just you have a TSV or CSV file. Let me open that up so you can see the one I just showed you is actually a TSV file. This one right here, and just double clicking on it, assuming you've got the Excel little logo over here, you know you've got your Windows system set up to assume that that is an Excel file and open it appropriately. So that's direct opening it. I'm going to get that out of the way. The second option is to open a blank worksheet, an entire workbook, an entire empty file, and then use the data, get external data from text, and then go and find the file and select it. There's advantages and disadvantages to these. I strongly prefer the first one because I like to have control over what's happening, even though it does mean sometimes I'm going to have some extra steps to do with when it tries to turn my text, things like ISBN numbers into numbers, and I'll show you all about that. But the import wizard that you find yourself in when you go through the getting external data does give you, and again, depending which version of Excel you're in, it does give you choices to, at that point, column by column, dictate whether it's general, which means it's going to guess what it is, or specify it's a text column or whatever. I have found with Excel 2016, and I don't know when they changed this, I think it might be this version, that it takes you through this thing called the query editor, and it's very confusing, and it also creates an internal link in the entire spreadsheet. The whole spreadsheet you're working with is now permanently linked to the original data file, and if you break that link, like you move or delete or whatever your original data file, or zip it or something, suddenly you start getting error messages every single time you open your working spreadsheet because it's complaining it can't find the linked original data file. So for those reasons, and there's one other thing it does, is that it tends to, the import wizard, it tends to import the data as a table rather than a normal sheet, and I'm about to explain that. So for all of those reasons, I really prefer the just to do it the direct way. So okay, so now let me stop a moment and explain the difference in Excel between normal sheets, or sometimes Excel calls them ranges, versus what Excel calls a formal table. I start off with a couple of bullets: how to convert an existing sheet to this table thing, and then if it did it to you and you don't want it, how to convert it back. So a table is where Excel specifically knows that your rows and columns are intended to be treated as a table, and this is what it means. It means that it assumes the first row is a header row for you. It turns on filtering automatically, so I'll show you that you got the little pull down arrows and everything to work with. I know some people were interested in color. It bands the rows into alternate shading, green, gray, or whatever. You get some choices about that. And when we start doing formulas that go down the columns, you don't have to autofill it. It will. You put the formula in the very first row, and it automatically just fills in the rest of the column for you. I don't think that's a huge gain because it's only one extra click to do that yourself. And I have run into some certain add-ons, complicated function extra packages that may actually require your data to be in table format for them to work. We may or may not get to fuzzy lookup at the very end of this. We'll see on the timing, but that's an example of one. The disadvantages to me are exactly the same as the first two advantages. Is I want to have control. I don't want it turning features on and off for me and doing coloring and things. That's just distracting. So let me go ahead and you can see I gave myself little notes in the corner as to what files I want to open up. So let me find my JR1 and open. Sorry, I've got to open this with Excel because it's a TXT now. I do have to say open with Excel. And so this is a raw from Elsevier Signed Direct, a JR1 file as opened directly, a TSV opened directly in Excel. And so we're ready to start doing things with it. So, okay, some more best practices. First of all, depending on how you imported, convert to or from table to sheet, as I just talked about. I also highly recommend renaming the sheet to something, because it comes in with, like you can see, this hideously long name. And when we start doing things like VLOOKUP or otherwise referencing one sheet from another sheet within the same file, that's going to be a real pain in the neck. So I always recommend rename that. And my favorite two ones are either to call it main or call it raw, something short without spaces in it. Like that. Everybody saw, just right click on the tab at the bottom and rename. Now, very important, you want to, for everything else we're going to be doing, you want to have a first row, which is column headers, and all the rest of the sheet is going to be your data. Any other header information, it should be gone out of there. And often you want to save that. So what you want to do is copy it to another sheet. So here I am. I'm going to use a little plus sign to create another sheet, which I'm going to rename something like header. Now I'm going to go back to main. And by the way, when I talk about header, you'll notice that our column headers, the one row I want to end up with at the top, is that it actually has another line after it, which there's totals, which is not really part of the data. So I'm going to copy all of 1 through 9. I'm just doing Control-C and Control-V over here. So now I've got that saved. And now I can afford to get rid of, I'm going to hit Escape to get rid of that, the little dotted lines. I'm going to delete rows 1 through 7, and then also delete row, which is now row 2, the totals. I don't want those in my way. Okay, so then also check, depending on the kind of report, check the bottom, see if there's some other kind of totals or subtotals or whatever. Counter reports don't have them, so I don't need to do it in this case. But if depending on the report, check to make sure there isn't something like that, and also move that line to this other sheet as well. Okay, so once having cleaned that up, now I'm ready to freeze the top row, which is just View. And actually, just to be safe, let me make sure I have it highlighted. View, freeze panes, freeze top row. And again, depending on the version of Excel you're using, that might be located in a slightly different place, but it's usually under View or Window tabs. So you want to freeze the top row. If you want to actually freeze so that you can scroll sideways and not lose the column A, which is very often your journal name, you do that instead by ironically selecting cell B2. So I'm on cell B2, and you go to freeze panes, and you can just select freeze first column. Actually, now in 2016, you can just say freeze first column. In older versions, you'd select B2 and you'd just choose freeze panes, and that would do it. So here I can now select freeze first column. And if I scroll sideways, or if I scroll up, oops, I think I've I've also unfrozen my, let me freeze my top row there. And now I can scroll this way, and I should also be able to scroll. Okay, it's giving me a hard time. Anyway, most important thing is to freeze your header. And let me come back to my presentation. Okay, so, oh yeah, it's very often, especially counter reports, the header row is wrapping, and that's annoying. So highlight your first column, and back in home, wrap text. So you can see the, you know, reporting period total versus HTML versus PDF and so forth. Okay, finally, another best practice, add a new first column. Depending on what your data is, this can be incredibly valuable so that you can preserve the original order. And this is most valuable if your report was originally like from your catalog or some system like that, where it did a really good job of sorting by LC class. And the moment you start changing things, it's really hard to get an LC class sort back properly again because of alphanumeric sorting being different. So highly recommend adding a column right at the very beginning called something like original order. Just put a 1, 2, and that's as far as you need to go. And then if you just, because we're basically priming Excel to say, I want to count down. So if you just do a 1 and then do what I'm about to do, you'll get 1s all the way down. But if you do a 1 and a 2, highlight them both, and then click on the little corner, Excel says, oh, you're trying to make a series. Okay, I'll fill the series for you. And it actually just did that all the way down to the very end. So I just used the term autofill, which I'm about to explain. So autofilling is when you do that, when you have and we're going to do tons of this. We're going to open up a blank column, put something in the first row, which is really the second row after your header, and then copy something all the way down automatically by clicking on that little corner. If you put in text or if you put in just one number, Excel will assume that what you mean to do is copy it all the way down. So if it's a series like 1, 2, 3, 4, you do 2 of them, make sure you have both of them selected when you click on the little corner, and then it gets the idea that you're trying to make a series. And that works with dates and incrementing dates and things like that too. Some other things to understand about autofill is if what you're starting off with is a formula, we're going to be doing lots of that. You start with that first, row 2, which is that first cell you're going to be filling. Excel will do what you want it to do, which is the next one down, it'll update the formula to refer to the cells in that row, not back to the first row again. So if you put in cell C, forget I don't have headers here, and say I'm in C1 and my point is to add up A1 plus B1, then if I autofill down, C will be filled with A2 plus B2, A3 plus B3, and what you want to have happen all the way down. If you go sideways, if I open up a column D and copy over, because you can autofill sideways too, it'll actually move the rows, the columns over. So D1 would become B1 plus C1. A became B, B became C. It just moved everything over 1. If that didn't make sense, experiment with it. Almost always you're doing this vertically. You're doing this down through a column. Sometimes you don't want it. You want to make sure it doesn't change the reference. You want to keep referring to a certain same row or a certain same column. And the way you do that in Excel is you put a $ in front of the row or the column reference. So for instance, if you were to do the formula in, say, column D, and you said $B $1 plus $C $1, and you tried to autofill that down, you're going to have exactly the same data all the way down, because that's an absolute reference to exactly those 2 cells. So someone had asked in the feedback to the signup specifically about applying a percentage increase, so I thought I'd use that as an example. So let me just open up my journal price list. Wait a minute, it's trying to, let me close that one for a moment and get, nope. So the ones I've already, I'm going to keep having to close things. Let's see, make sure I've got the right one. Okay, so here's a price list from Science Direct, and you might want to say I haven't really started to clean this one up yet, just to show you how autofill might work in column N. Say you wanted to assume that the price is going to go up 5% next year off of the Canada US dollar column. So I would say, which some of them don't have anything, so you would say equal. Oh, by the way, sometimes when you open up spreadsheets that you've downloaded from places, they come with this protected view warning, and you have to enable editing, which is what just happened to me, which is why I couldn't edit it, and it bounced it back to my other screen for a moment here. Okay, so now I can type in the box. So I also highly recommend, especially with complicated formulas, that you use the formula bar at the top instead of trying to type inside the little tiny cell box, because it's much easier to see what you're doing up here. So equals cell K2 times 1.05, because if you want to increase by 5%, you have the full 100% plus another 5%, so that's 1.05. And then I want to autofill it down, because it's a formula, and down it goes. Highlight the row and say I want this to be in percentages, and now that I have my percent. If you haven't had a chance to see this yet, sometimes if you've got too many decimal points, Excel gives you that hash mark row, and so you just widen it up a little bit so you can see the full numbers, and you might want to get rid of some decimal points. In this case, I don't know why it's giving me 100 and, oh, wait a minute, sorry, this is not percentages, of course this is dollars. Sorry, that makes more sense. There we go. Okay. And by the way, Cynthia, if anything comes up in the chat, please feel free to interrupt me. Okay, so that's how you do that. I'm going to throw a bunch of formulas at you, some of which we're going to be using later. I'm not going to try to demo each one of these individually right now, but again, I intended this slide deck to also double as a nice little reference sheet for you. So sum, if you want to do a sum of a column, basic, add them up. This is basically how do you do it. You always start formulas with an equal sign. So add them up is sum, parentheses, and let's say the column you want to add is column A, and you've got a header row. So almost all my examples are going to start with A2 because I'm assuming a header row. And if your data goes down to 254, you can do that. But you can also just say sum A colon A to get the entire column. But just be careful you don't put that anywhere in column A, like don't put it in the last row at the bottom of column A, because you're going to get a circular reference error because the sum itself is part of the range. That's a bad thing to do. There's also sum if, so you can sum things up if something is true. So, and you can sum up a column if some other column is true. So this would be like all the things where there's a 0 in column A, you want to add up the values in column B. So that's what sum if is. I just give another example of that. And the criteria could actually be a text string. So it could be if value in A equals journal as opposed to book, then add up the values in column B. There's also, oops, sorry, went too far. There's also count. Count counts the number of cells. It's not adding them up with numeric values. And I point out a 0 will count, but a blank will not. If you want to count everything that's not blank, including text, you use count A for alphanumeric. And there's also a count if. So some also functions I'm going to use a lot more later, just want to make sure you're aware of. With text strings, text values, to get the leftmost characters, use left and then referencing cell A2. And again, the idea is you do this in a whole column with autofill. So you start with A2 and then you're going to populate it all the way down. And right is the last 3 characters. And then mid is when you can specify exactly the starting point and exactly the length. So you also use double quotation marks for literal characters anytime a formula involves strings. And here's a really specific example, which has got an obvious use case of how you might use this. So if you have as a text string your ISSN without hyphens and you want to add your hyphens, and starting with column A2, column A is where your ISSN is that doesn't have hyphens in it, you would say the left 4 characters of A2 and ampersand, a hyphen, ampersand, the rightmost 4 characters of A2, we'll take the example text here and return back that in the column that you're actually doing this formula in. So that's something I do all the time, is that very specific example. I just threw in here in case it comes up in your needs for formulas if you start getting more advanced, just that if you need to return the full length of the string, the formula is len. That's different from other places you might have done things where it's the full word length. It's just len. Okay.
Melissa, just a
Yes.
quick question that's come up.
Yep.
When you're doing that autofill and when you're on the spreadsheet, you said you click on you highlight the cell you're going to want to autofill or the cells, and you click the corner. What corner are you talking about?
Oh, so if you can see where I am right. Oh, do you not see my mouse?
Not really well.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm sorry. Oh, it's a good thing we're catching this now because I thought you could see my mouse. Okay, if you can see cell N2 is where I am right now.
Yeah.
The bottom right corner of it has a little solid square in it. And that's what I double clicked on to populate the whole, to autofill the whole column down.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Got it now.
Okay. I saw a quick message from, I think it might have been Allison, about concatenate. Concatenate is a more longer worded function for putting together text strings, but it has some limitations, and using the ampersand, I think, gives you much more control over exactly how you want to put this together. But there are lots of other Excel functions that I am not touching today because I want to make sure we have lots of time to do VLOOKUP and pivot tables, which are, I think what a lot of what you are here to learn about. Just starting with the basics to make sure everybody's on the same page as far as some of these basic functions that we're definitely going to need when we get to VLOOKUP and in particular, and other cleanup functions. So some more basic text string functions. If statements are real, and it's not just text strings, but you often use them with text strings. Very, very important function is your if. If some kind of criteria, comma, then what if the if is true, if the criteria is true, and then what if it's false, what it should return. Because remember, you're putting this into a cell, so it's going to put something in the cell based on the formula. So I'm building on what you just learned. So if for instance your column A is ISBNs and you have a mix of 10-digit and 13-digit ISBNs, and we still seem to be at the point where all our 13-digit ISBNs begin with 978. I haven't seen any yet that don't, but you may have. But for example, so you want to say if the leftmost 3 characters of column A is 978, this must be a 13-digit ISBN. Otherwise, it must be a 10-digit ISBN. And realistically, you're not going to put all that string into your column. There's not too much point to that. What you'd really have in the true and the false is something else you're going to do as a basis for that. You're going to do something else with the ISBN number based on whether it is 13 or 10 digits. Okay, some other things just wanted to point out for people who are used to other programming languages, that not equal to is the greater than less, or the less than greater than combined. There is also an is blank formula that you can stick into the middle of it. You can say if parentheses is blank, parentheses A2, returns the value true for the purpose of the true and false of the formula, of the if formula. There's a not. You can say not parentheses your criterion if you want to reverse your true and false logic. There's also and or, which I don't need to teach library people what and or mean in our search logic. So you can say if column A is empty and column B is not empty, then so that the and is combining together the 2 criteria with a comma here. So imagine that this was holdings data for, a report of what a database has full text of. Well, if column A is supposed to be the start date and column B is supposed to be the end date, if there's an end date but there's no start date, something's wrong. So you might want to return no start date, and otherwise you might want to return the concatenation of the start date and a hyphen and the end date, for instance, as an example. Or is just like and in terms of its syntax, with the parentheses and the comma between the different criteria, but of course, or only one of them has to be true. Notice that that on the equal sign and the not equals with strings, the string is case insensitive. So if it can be, if you say if A2 equals lowercase a, it will also match on capital A. And same thing for an entire word. It doesn't care about the case. Okay, I want to show you this one really fast because I know people were interested in parsing easy proxy raw log files. It's used to search to find a pattern, just to return a simple like yes or no or 1 or 0 or something like that, if that pattern exists within the cell. So in this case, this I've actually got two functions wrapped together here, and I'll explain that in a moment. So search would say I'm trying to find this string, which is a piece of a URL that might be what you're trying to count up in the proxy log file. If that appears in cell A2, so assuming A2 has your raw log file data or the URL piece of your log file data, then it would return the starting position of the string, and search will return an error if it doesn't find the string at all. So what I've done is I've wrapped, that's the vocabulary, I've wrapped the search formula inside an if error formula, so that instead of getting down my column, I get, that it appeared in 3264 # value, 3210 # value when it doesn't appear. If it's returning # value or # NA or anything like that, any of the error messages, instead of getting the horrible error message, I get just a double blank. So if error says, if this thing doesn't return an error, give me what it gave you. But if it does return an error, put this thing in instead, which is in this case, I just put in double quote marks twice to say, give me blank back. And then, for instance, in this particular example with the proxy log files, what you might do is you'd then maybe way at the bottom or on another column somewhere, you could just do the count on column. Actually, that would be column B. I just realized, because that's where you're putting the formulas. It'd be B:B to find the total, the total number of lines that matched. This is a journal that doesn't give us counter data, so this is how I count up how many PDFs were used from that journal, so whether we should renew it or not. So I have a quick demo file here. Let me go pull that up. Is my sample raw data, which is coming up. Oh, so I'm going to go close the journal one. Don't save. Bring this one over. And I need to go find my formula again because I left it here. So here I am. I pre-opened this up. I've parsed out an easy proxy raw log file. And just for this purpose, I anonymized my IP addresses so I don't expose anything. Oh, and that's right, I already put it. So in this case, my URLs are over in column G, and I'm looking for how many times people went to our psych department reserves on our website. So I'm searching for /reserves/psych in column G, and it's blank because the first one isn't, but as I autofill down with the little corner, here's where it starts. So I get blank if there isn't a match, and I get the starting position if there is. I wouldn't add up these starting positions. They don't mean anything. I would count on them to find the ones that are non-blank. Okay, and that's all I wanted to do with that spreadsheet. Okay, data types. This is one of the most confusing things, and it becomes very important when we do VLOOKUP, especially to do with things like ISSNs and ISBNs. There's two very important data types of what is in your columns, what's in your cells: text and numbers, and there are a couple of others, like error messages themselves, and whether something is true false is actually a data type. But the most important ones are being able to tell the difference between when something is a number or a text, because what looks like a number Excel may actually think is text, or vice versa. And especially ISBNs and ISSNs may import, when you open up the file, may import as a number, and when it imports as a number, it loses the leading 0. So I'm going to cover much more about that in a moment. Now, one important way you can tell the difference, but you have to open things up for yourself so you can see it, and I'm about to open up a spreadsheet here, is, first of all, this column is the fact that it's putting my ISBNs in scientific notation is a really good clue that they're numbers, not text. 9.78 blah blah E +12. But sometimes even if it doesn't do that, if you've got it, here, by the way, how you fix that when it's actually numbers is we come over here and we say, give it to me as an actual proper number. Okay, and get rid of the decimal points. Oops, wrong direction. Okay, so now if suppose it hadn't done that stupid scientific notation, and I was looking at this and I'm like, well, does it think these are text or does it think these are numbers? One quick way I can tell is they're all right justified. So within column B, everything's squished over to the right. By default, well, you can change that and don't mess yourself up by changing it, forcing the justification, which you can do over up here in the toolbar. But by default, numbers are right justified and text is left justified. Now, if you let your column be so narrow that you can't really see the justification, I always recommend always open up your columns just enough so that you can see enough padding of space that you can tell whether they're right or left justified. So that's one tip. So numbers aligned to the right, text aligns to the left. Dates are stored as numbers internally. They are considered what's called type 1. So dates also align to the right if they're proper dates and not text that appears to be dates. There's also a formula you can use to test, and that's especially useful if there's a chance that your data is mixed. And a big example of that is ISSNs, where ISSNs that don't end in an X and don't have hyphens are treated as numbers, and ISSNs that do end in an X and don't have hyphens are treated as text. So here's a thing you can do. I'm going to insert a column, test my ISBNs. Oops, I'm not going to waste time fixing my typo. But if I say formula type on cell B2, it'll give me a 1 if it's a number and 2 if it's a text. And again, I'm going to autofill. And then what I can do is, as we'll get to the sort and filter later, I could sort or filter on this to see, do I have anything all the way down here that's not a 1? Or if I were trying to go the other way, that's not a 2. So you can very quickly test an entire column of data to make sure it's consistent by using the type formula. So that's what I'm showing here in type column, my example column A. Okay. Also, if you're ever entering numbers entering data by hand that looks like a number, but you want, or even that looks like a date, and you want it to be treated as text, you start with an apostrophe, which is or the single quote mark, and that forces Excel in the cell itself. That forces Excel to know that this is text, despite the fact that Excel wants to treat it as something else. Okay, so here's how you deal with what I just had there. So it came in as numbers, and I want to force it to be text, and this is how you do it. You say equals text, then the cell, and then if you need to restore leading zeros, like we often need to do, especially with the ISSNs, you literally count out as many zeros as you want there to be total. So in this case, I would say if they're all 978, I don't need to worry about it. Here, let me clean out that column. I'm going to reuse it for this formula. I want to say equals text B2, comma 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And in this case, I without looking all the way down the data, I don't know how many of them are 10 digit, how many of them are 13. The 13s will always be fine because they always start with 978 so that we never lose any leading zeros. So I really only have to do 10 to make sure the 10 digit ones don't lose leading zeros. And you'll see that doesn't cause a problem for the 13s. The 13s keep all their digits. Autofill that down. You notice this column is left justified instead of right justified. It's leaning to the left edge of the C column, so we know it's text. Then the next thing you might want to do, copy the entire column, do a paste special of the value so you don't copy the formula. By the way, if I copy the formula, you see horrible things go wrong. So I want to copy the values, and now column B, and it has that little corner mark that's actually Excel complaining that, hey, this looks like a number, but you've got it formatted as a number stored as text. Yes, that's what I wanted. Thank you very much. That's what that corner is telling you, some kind of warning. And now I can delete this column because I don't need it anymore. And by the way, when you're doing transformations like this that are one-time transformations, and you don't need to go back to the original, I don't ever want to go back to my ISBNs being numbers again. I do recommend this kind of sequence. You do the formula column, you paste special back onto the original data so it's clean. Because remember, this isn't your original copy of your file. This is your analysis working copy of your file. So you can always go back to the original data file because you saved that separately, right? And then anyway, so you do the paste special, and then you get rid of the formula column because formulas take up a lot of memory, and I'm going to get to that in a moment too, later in this. So that when you're done with a formula, when you don't really need it anymore, and remember, it's not one formula, it's one formula times how many rows you've got going all the way down. It's get rid of it, and it just improves performance time, especially with gigantic spreadsheets. Here's a more complicated formula. I'm not going to try to demo this. If you have mix of 10-digit and 13-digit, you can do something like this. And again, I'm showing you how to combine formulas on top of each other. So in my first if condition, if the text of A0 in one single character, if the left of it is when I forgot something, that there's in between those right here where I've highlighted, there should be a (3), because left needs two arguments. It needs the first argument, which is the string, and the second argument, which is how many characters. I forgot the 3 in there, sorry. So if left of text A0 is 3, if it begins with a 978 is what I'm saying, then I want to pad it out 13 digits, and just in case they suddenly start doing ISBNs that start with zeros that are 13 digits, and then otherwise pad it out with 10 digits. So that's the logic there. Okay. Why am I not going to my next slide? There we go. Okay, so part of when we start getting to things like VLOOKUP, when you want to start combining data across multiple reports, so important to normalize whatever is going to be that column that you match things up on the basis of, which is very often ISSNs or ISBNs. And so I call that normalizing them. Since most reports I see don't have hyphens, if you occasionally get one that does, I recommend basically get ISBNs converted to text but without hyphens, get ISSNs converted to having the hyphen, and that guarantees that it's text, and then you don't need to worry about it. And that way they're always consistent across all your different sheets, and you never have to worry about trying to compare a text against a number and not having it match properly when you're doing a VLOOKUP. So anyway, if you use a find replace to get rid of all the hyphens in something which looks numeric-ish, what Excel will do is it'll turn the entire column into integers instead of text, even though it started as text. So you don't want to do find replace. Instead, you do the whole thing with the separate column with the substitute formula. So if column A is your ISBNs, you substitute hyphen into nothing, which is the double quote mark. That will give you a new column, which is all your ISBNs without any hyphens in them, but still as text. And then you do that copy paste special on top of your original column again, and they'll stay text. I've got to watch the time because I'm like nowhere near where we need to be. So okay, so I'm going to start flying through these a little bit faster, and you can come and look at, use the slides for references later. So I've already shown you about, oh, I think I just moved in the wrong direction here. Why is my, okay, ISSNs, similar principle, text, the cell that has the ISSNs that may be numeric and you may be losing leading zeros, you can actually do this as a pattern in text and it works. So you can say, give me that number as 0000-000, and if the value is already text because it has that X at the end, it will leave it alone, which means you don't get the hyphen. So here's a more complicated version of that formula, which actually says if the cell is already type 2, then that means it's already text, then you have to do this left and right with the hyphen in the middle. Otherwise, if it's type 1, then you can use the normal text formula to convert it into a properly padded with the hyphen. So I know you're probably a little dizzy at that, so come back and look at it later. But that's how you do it. Okay, so I've already mentioned this. I highly recommend, after normalizing data, convert the entire column from the formula to the direct values. You can use right-click right-click, copy, right-click, paste special values. And I just want to, again, show you the, let's see, I have to copy first. And then you can go under this to see all the little choices, but basically the first one is straight paste, and the one that has the 1, 2, 3 on it means the values. So that's paste values. And that basically takes the formula out and hard codes what the formula had returned. So a couple of reasons to do that. I mentioned the performance drag on large spreadsheets. The other reason is that once you've got it fixed, there's no benefit to keeping the formula in there. You just make a risk of accidentally ruining the formula, but there's no gain to be had. So, okay, dates are troublesome. First of all, dates are actually wonderful if Excel already figured out that it is a date. If they're right aligned in the column, then you can work with them, and I'll show you some easy things. If it's a string that looks like a date and it's what I call fully padded, so like January is 01 rather than just 1, then you can use left, mid, and right very easily to parse the thing out. And here's just an example of it. And then if you want to convert it to the string value, the text value, into a proper date, so you would do a formula like I have down here. The date formula takes 3 pieces of text, which represent the year, the month, and the date, and converts it into a true date. So dates I said are stored numerically. They're literally stored as an integer number that started counting, I think, like 1970 or something like that. But by using the display functions, you see it as what kind of date you want to see. So when you have a true date, so the reason why you might want to do that is so now you have a true date and in the column. And when you have a true date in the column, you can use nice functions like weekday. And so, like if you're working on log file data from your reference desk tracker data, and you want to analyze, are we getting more questions on Saturdays than we are on Fridays? You can use, if column A now has a proper date in it, you can do another column that's weekday A2, and it'll return a 1 if it's a Sunday through 7 if it's a Saturday. And now you can, as we get into things like pivot, you can then pivot on that and do a nice little chart that says how many of everything that you have on Saturdays versus Fridays and whatever. And I give some examples. The text feature combined with weekday, instead of having the 1 for Sunday, you could actually say Sun or Sunday. Text has some weird sort of hidden features to it. So it knows if you say DDD, that you mean sun, the 3-letter abbreviation, but if you do 4 Ds, it doesn't do 4 letters, it actually does the entire word. And the same thing is true with month. 3 M's will give you January, 4 M's will give you the entire month name. And I think I'm going to skip demoing that one for now. Okay, if it's not fully padded, if you have something like 1/31/2007 and 10/2, not 0/2/2007, sometimes the date value function can figure it out, sometimes not. Otherwise, there is a way to solve this using something called text to columns, and then take out each of the pieces separately. And I'm going to rush through that, and we'll see if we have time later to get to it. Why is my, okay. Okay, so some more cleanup that you may have to do. There's 2 functions, trim and clean. If you have weird hidden spaces that can also, if you find yourself having to match, again, I'm thinking ahead to VLOOKUP, where you might have to match on a column where there might be leading or ending spaces in your data, and it's often you don't notice them to eyeball them, but they cause things to not match that to your eyeballs should be matching. Or even maybe double spaces somehow in the middle between words or things. Trim removes just those hidden spaces. Clean removes non-printing characters, including sometimes your data weirdly gets line breaks in the middle of your data. Clean won't remove the spaces, so you have to combine the 2. So here's, to do all of column A, starting in cell A2, you do a trim and then or the clean, and you could do it the other way around. You could do the clean inside and the trim on the outside, doesn't matter. You do not have to worry about clean removing diacritics and things like that. It only removes truly non-printable characters. And again, I'm just going to repeat one more time. After you do something like this, you want to do a copy paste special once it's cleaned up. So you get rid of the formula and you put the text cleaned up version on top of the original column, so you don't have to worry about that being a problem again later. Okay, LC call numbers, always lots of fun. So you've got a spreadsheet that's got the full LC call number, and what you want to do, for instance, is you want to do a report by the top LC class, the one letter or two letter, and then sometimes, especially like in the Ks, you may have 3-letter LC classes. I'm not going to try to parse this all the way out for you. I'm using a combination of mid and left, and value is a function which tells me if what mid is returning is actually a number, because you have like HM5, and if the third character is a 5, then I have at most a 2-letter LC, and then I'll check to see if the second position is also a number. Anyway, that's the idea. So I do a series of nested ifs using mid and value and is error to try to identify, is my third character actually a number? Is my second character actually a number? To tell whether I should return you 3 letters or 2 letters or 1 letter. And that one I think is important enough that I'm going to not skip that one. So here's my spreadsheet. That's the old one. Here it is. And here's my full, and like I said before, always do an original order, original sort column if you've got call numbers as part of your, especially if your spreadsheet started being sorted by call numbers, because returning it basically to a true call number sort is a nightmare. So here is that horrible formula. In this case, my call number is in column D instead of column A, but here's what happens with that formula put into the first row. And you see why when you start getting big formulas like this, you want to be editing them up here and not trying to edit them down in the cell itself. And it just returns the first couple of characters as I go down. Whoops, I was trying to find the beginning of the B's. So you see it'll return just a B if it's a B number, and it returns the two letters, and so forth if it's 2. Okay, moving on. Removing duplicate rows, someone specifically mentioned they wanted to see that. Certainly Excel 2016, and I'm not sure how many versions further back, have a function built in to do this. And again, depends on which version you're on, what exactly it looks like, but that strange little icon right there is a remove duplicates, and it will give you the option to actually say how you want to, if you want to define the duplicate as the entire row, every single field has to match perfectly for it to count as a duplicate, or sometimes for whatever reason, wherever your data comes from, maybe if just the ISSN matches, you don't care what the rest of it says, and you want only 1 line per ISSN, so you want to count it as duplicate if just column A matches the. So you'll have that choice. Be warned that removing duplicate rows, once you start going into this process and you say, okay, it immediately removes all the rows. It doesn't give you an opportunity to sort of like see which ones are duplicates. So just be aware of that. There's a fancier way of doing this involving formulas and extra columns, and I'm not going to have time to cover that, but if you're interested in learning that, contact me. Okay, sorting. So probably most of you have done this, so I'm going to quickly make sure you've done all of the preliminary stuff we've talked about. Make sure you've got 1 header row and just data that's all the same data, no like that horrible thing with the Taylor and Francis combined thing. Make sure that all the way down is going to be your same kind of data that needs to be sorted on. And if you want to make sure that you don't actually have a row or column selected. So here I am back in this one again. So let me come over to, say bib IDs are the code numbers in our catalog system. Say I want to sort on bib ID for some reason. If I select column B and then I go to over here, sort and find, and say sort smallest to largest, I'm going to get this warning. It's you always want to expand the selection, otherwise it's going to sort just B and not the rest of it, and that's a disaster for your data. So you always want to expand selection, but that always gives me a little bit of a panic on how far it thinks to expand. So instead, if I just have it selected without the whole column, just be on the cell, and then I say sort, it does what I want. It sorts the entire spreadsheet properly. Okay, there is a feature that you can, if you go to sort and filter custom sort, under custom sort, you can actually start choosing to sort on multiple rows. So you can sort within location, and then within location sort on call number or LC class or whatever you want to do. And you can even row by row. One of them you may want to sort smallest to largest, and then within that sort largest to smallest on the next criteria. Okay. Okay, filters. So filters are a way of viewing portions of your data, some rows of your data, without actually deleting them or changing the sort order around. So the way you do that is generally highlight the entire row, and you come over to sort and filter, and you turn on filter. And so it's going to give us this little arrow at the top of each column on the header, so that you can filter by values in that column. So I only want to see my oversized books. So I first of all turn off select all and then check oversize and say, okay, now I'm seeing only the oversized rows. Oh, by the way, it tells you at the bottom 109 of 60,000 rows selected, which can be helpful too. So I'm seeing only the oversized rows. And if I were to do anything like an autofill column, I'm only going to get values for the rows that I'm seeing. So if you turn on a filter, remember to turn it off if you plan to then do one of those new formula columns, but you intend to apply it to your entire set of data. So if you do something that's got a lot of values, like, so let me turn that one off by going back to select all. This can be really ridiculously tedious. So what you can do is, say I want all of the Bs, anything that's B or BF or whatever. I unselect the select all, turn them all on, or turn them all off, and then if I say B, it's finding all the ones. Oh, no, right, sorry. Actually, no, that it's going to find all the ones that have B's in it too. Sorry, I have to do that with the text filter, which says begins with B, and then okay. And now I'm going to get all the ones that are B anything. Yeah, sorry about that. Now, you can turn on multiple filters, and that does the equivalent of an AND. So if I want to find all my oversized B's, if I have any, I have a few oversized B's. There we go. If you start doing lots of filters and you're like, oh God, I want to change all of this, instead of fixing them one at a time, it's so much easier to just turn the whole filter off and then just turn it back on again and do new filter criteria. Okay. So, okay, cleaning up some bad data. And I actually made a mistake here too because I'm used to using Google Sheets. So you can, I talked about this with the type already. Now that you know how to use sort and filter, you can make extra columns that are temporary extra columns for catching bad data. Like do a type formula down column if you're expecting it all to be numbers, and then use either sort or filter to find anything that's not a 1, and you've just found text in what's supposed to be your numeric column, or vice versa. Length, again, it's Google Sheets says length, it's LEN in Excel, sorry, so this should be LEN parentheses A2. If you expect all of them to be a certain length, then you can use this column and then combine with sort or filter to find anything that's the wrong size. And again, usually when you're using a formula to check bad data in another column, these are sort of temporary columns that you then delete when you're done fixing your bad data. Okay, now with less than an hour to go, we're going to do VLOOKUP, and then we're going to do pivot tables. And both of these are really important and are going to draw on everything else that we've been doing up to this point, to all the methods we've been using up to this point, to really start to get the data ready for part 2 of this series, which we're going to do another day, which is going to be the data visualization and making pretty charts and graphs and stuff. So VLOOKUP, combining data from different lists. First thing you have to get, so for instance, say you have a price list from the vendor and you have your usage data from the vendor, or you have the price list and you have the CRKN KBART file or title list or something like that. The first thing you have to do is you have to get them into the same spreadsheet file, otherwise known as book or workbook. So you start by opening them both up. So let me close some of the other spreadsheets I've been working with that I don't need anymore. Save, no. So give me a moment here to get to, so I have All done. So this is the Springer Nature Journal's price list, and the second one that I want to combine it with is my Springer 2016 counter report. So immediately I have to do some cleanup things, and just to save time, I'm not gonna bother making the separate header one. I'm just gonna delete these things that are in my way. So I have my header row. And this, by the way, came in as I downloaded from the website, so I didn't have a choice. I had to take an Excel file, so I have all this obnoxious stuff. It even came in pre-filtered. No, thank you. I don't want the filter turned on. I do want to freeze my header rows on both of them, freeze top row, and on the other one, view, freeze top row. Okay, basic cleanup stuff. Okay, also recommend widening your critical columns here. My ISSN and my online ISSN in the counter report came in with hyphens, which means they came in as text, which is nice. And how about my other one? How did they come in? Good. They also came in as text with hyphens, which is nice. So I want to bring the price list over into being another column. You could go in either direction, depending on what your purpose is. I want to bring this one in to give me the price next to my usage data. So, oh, by the way, something else I likely want to do is sort home, sort Z to A. So here's the journals we use the most. And now I want my goal is to put next to these what the retail price of these is. So I'm going to get ready by making a column, but I'm not quite ready yet because I need to get my data in here from the other spreadsheet. The way I do that is in this spreadsheet. Here's my list tab. I right click, move or copy. I want to, first of all, always create a copy, don't move. And I go find the other book I have open. So here's my JR1 file, my analysis JR1 copy. I don't care whether I put it at the end or not, but I'm going to create a copy. And now, back to my JR1. Now I have my original sheet 0, which, by the way, I'm going to rename main, and which I should have done as part of my basic first things to do. And now here's list from the other one. Now I can close the other one. I don't need it anymore. Don't save any changes. And now I'm ready to actually do a VLOOKUP. So here's how we do it. I want to bring in the column. Let's see. I want, which one do I want? I don't see a Canadian one, so I'm gonna do I want the E price for in US dollars, because that's probably also the Canadian one. So that's column Q. And so based on a match on column F, which is my electronic ISSN, I want to bring column Q over to here, copy it over. So I want to match what's in G here, my online ISSN here, to column F here, and then when it matches, I want to bring in the value in column Q, which is my price. So here we go. We say equals, and you're going to start to see why so many of the previous things, why I recommended what I do. VLOOKUP, G2, that's what I want to look up. I want to look up it in the list tab, which is why I want to make sure that has a nice, short, easy name with no spaces in it, because I have to type it here. And if it has spaces or something in it, I have to put in quote marks. It's really miserable. And I want to match on column F, and what I want to pull in is column Q. And this next one is weird. I have to tell it, even though I told it F to Q, Excel is stupid, and it wants to know which of those columns I want. Well, I want from F to Q, I'm going to start counting on my fingers. F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q. Q is 12 columns away from column F. So I put in a 12. I did not invent this, don't blame me. And then the last thing I put in is a comma and a 0 to say I only want exact matches. Don't find me a nearest close match. I don't want to match. So there it is. And if I were to go back and look, and you can reality check it, If I go back and find the journal of called Psychopharmacology, over here, I'm going to find that it should be $9,770 US. I'm getting close. So psychopharmacology here. I'm going to go look at column Q and hope it doesn't make a liar out of me. Column Q is $9,770. There it is right there. And so I do my little with the corner, double click on the corner, copy it all the way down. Now this is dollar amounts, so I come over here and say, give this to me as dollars. And I don't really need all those extra decimal points. And all the way down. Oh, and you can see what it did is it gave me NAs if it couldn't find a match. So that can be extremely annoying. You could sort on this column or filter on the column and figure out what to do about those because you just don't have that data. You can also, in a technique you saw me do earlier, I'm going to just quickly, I'm going to do, by the way, Shift Command down arrow to clean out all of the column below cell 2. I didn't want to have to type my formula again, but Shift Command, or in Max it's Shift Command down arrow. I want to wrap this in an if error so I don't have those horrible errors. If error, whoops, if keyboard is suddenly not typing well, if error, if my VLOOKUP formula doesn't give me an error, I get my value. If it doesn't match, I want to actually say something nice and friendly like no match, and then copy it down again. And now, instead of seeing error messages, I will see a nice friendly no match. And you can do whatever you want to do about that. So that's how you do VLOOKUP. Now, part of what my problem might have been is that often, depending on where you're getting these two sheets from, is that the vendors may be inconsistent about print ISSN and online ISSN. So here's a more complicated trick. Is I want to be able to match online. I'll start with my online ISSN to explain this, but I want it to be able to match on either column E or column F just to be safe, but just in case they've messed up and the print ISSN and the e-ISSN have gotten swapped in the data they gave me. The easiest way to do that is to combine. We're going to combine these two into one column using another method that you've already learned. I'm going to create a new column, my ISSN combo. And I'm somewhere down in the middle of the table. That's always make sure when you're doing column formulas that you always start back at row 2 again. And I'm going to say I want E2, and I'm going to just stick in a semicolon and F2. So now I've got both of them, and in this case E2 was blank, so there's nothing there. Auto-populate my formula all the way down. So the ones that have both of them in there. Now, how do I match on that? So let me come back to here. And I'm going to clean that out because I have to change my formula a little bit. I'm going to leave my if error in there. So I'm going to use wildcards on the thing that I'm trying to match. So instead of just saying G2, I'm going to say quote mark asterisk quote mark anything and ampersand G2 and another quote mark asterisk quote mark. So I'm going to say, basically I'm saying if the exact text of G2 appears anywhere within column F, and by the way, because I added an extra column over in list, you might notice the dollar amount is wrong because you notice it changed me from F to R. Is that actually what I want? No, what I want is G to R. Is it R now? Yes, my US rate. So I actually want to match G to R in the list. And there I'm back to my 9770 and populate it all the way down. So let's see if that helped or if I still have a lot. I still have some no matches, and that could be just bad data, and if bad data is bad data if there's no help for it, if the vendor just doesn't give you, but that can help you. You could then do the same thing on the print column against the combo to help see if that helps solve some of the no matches, and often combining those two does. So actually, let me just show you that one really fast, because that's well worth doing. This is such a common problem. So now I'm going to copy my formula. I don't want to if I copy it like as a direct copy and paste, it's going to change the columns, and I don't want to. I want to change this one to being F, not H, which is what it would do to me. So if I manually copy it as like a plain text copy and paste up here, it's actually, now it's matching on column F against the combo column. I'm not surprised that most of these are the same. This one didn't have a match on this one. Let's see if it solved any of my, this one didn't have a match. It's still not helping this one. But it helped this one. We managed to get a price for this one. So then you can start doing more clever things to make a combination of these two by saying, if H is a dollar value, then report H, otherwise report I, something like that. And then that becomes your final total column. But that's how you do VLOOKUP. And as you can tell from what I've been doing, very, very important that the column you're matching on is the same data type. If these are text and the one I'm trying to match on over in list, if those weren't text, if those were numeric, I would be getting nothing but no match all the way down. So that's how VLOOKUP works. Another important thing to notice, and that's inherent, or let me go back to main, that you may have figured out when I did that silly exercise of counting on my fingers that column R is 12 columns away from column G, is the order of them. For this to work, the column that you match on has to come before the column that you want to pull the data from. That is to say, in this case, the column with the ISSN in list has to come before the price. Because I can't say -12, I can't say count backwards. So sometimes you have to rearrange the columns in your list, the one you're pulling from, to make sure that the one you want to match on comes alphabetically first before the one you want to pull the data from. There is, just for those of you who are slightly more sophisticated, there is a more complex formula combination from VLOOKUP called index match that you embed in two different formulas, index and match, in a very weird combination that does the same thing, except it allows the two columns to be in any order. But that's like super complicated, so I'm not going to do that. It's easy enough just to rearrange the columns so that they're in the order you need. I could have, by the way, also rearranged the columns so that R was right next to, or I could even just copy it. So if I just insert a new column, by the way, rearrange in Excel means copy and paste. There's no way to just drag the whole thing over. So I'm going to copy that column and paste it over here. And I might as well just paste literally the whole thing, or I could paste values. Oh, that was the wrong one, wasn't it? I just pulled the euros. But anyway, you get the idea. And then I could go delete the other one, or I could leave it alone, either way. And that way I could just do from H to I or G to I or whatever and not have to count so many columns. That's VLOOKUP. Let me just go back to my slides. I've referred to all of these things already about the naming. Yeah, oh, so the column that you're matching on, I think I used this term when I was talking, I call that the index column. Oh, titles make for very poor matches, depressingly even from the same vendor. It's ridiculous, but sometimes they'll have the A at the beginning of the book name and sometimes they won't, and they'll have it, or the at the beginning of the title journal title, and sometimes they won't, or sometimes they'll actually say comma the at the end of the journal title name. So you really want to try, if at all possible, have some kind of unique numeric or quasi-numeric value, and it might even be a proprietary ID number by the vendor. But you want to use something like that. I talked about making sure your index column, the corresponding columns on both sheets, are normalized in exactly the same way. And make sure the index column comes before, in this case, like the ISSN comes before the price column. Okay, and I've just demoed this all for you. So, and I just had another example here where if my price was in F and my ISSN was in A, then they're 6 columns apart, so you put a 6 in the VLOOKUP. And I showed you the wildcards and the wildcards with 2 ISSNs. Okay, so we are ready to start doing pivot tables because we now have our data is fully cleaned up and we've pulled together into one sheet, which you need for pivot tables, the data from as many different spreadsheets as you want to make sense of what it is you want to do. So now let's talk about what a pivot table is. A pivot table is a way of getting Excel to summarize a big sheet full of raw data. Most often when you want to add up things into groupings by another column. So for instance, if I wanted to, like in this case, if all I want to do is add up all of the dollar values, then that you just do a simple sum formula. But if you want to add up across, well, let me just go into it. I'm going to explain the steps in here. You select the columns you want, you insert a pivot table, and then you start. I'll show you. So, oops, wait a minute. I want to get to my next. And you also, very important, Excel tends to default on its own guess whether what you want to do is add or sum up or count. So you have to pay attention to that and fix it if it didn't do what you want. I'm going to actually come back to this one because I want to. Yeah, well, no, let me do this one first. I did have a plan in mind. You can use pivot tables, because this is a very simple example, as a cleanup tool for your data to find variance. So let me go find my ebook publisher cleanup. And those of you who are actually in my APLA workshop, Allison and Maya's APLA workshop, have already seen this example. That's the old one. Let me close that, and I'm going to just say save to that one. Yes, yes, yes. And let me show you the new one. Okay. So I've got a list of ebook data from, in this case, from ProQuest, and I'm interested in counting how many, but this is like from a big package, a huge package, and I want to count up how many books are by publisher, because I want to kind of see how many of them are scholarly publishers and things like that. So if I do a really simple pivot, all I want to do is count up by publisher name how many of each there are. So here's how you do it. You insert a pivot table, and if you've already selected the column, you don't have to pay attention to any of this. You can just say okay. So that's a good reason to select it. I want my rows to be the publisher name, and I want my values, what it's going to count up, to also be the publisher column. And it actually got it right. It defaulted to counting them, which is good. And what this does for me now, I can see, and it just by default sorts in alphabetical order, and I can see my counts. I can like make this maybe a little narrower or something if I want to bring these a little closer together. But what it also does for me is it helps me as a cleanup tool, because I can go down. So like I see Ballantine and Books and Ballantine Publishing Group are 2 different lines. Now, Association for ASCD. ASCD spelled out and spelled out with the acronym are 2 different lines. And that's clearly supposed to be the same one, right? Up here I've got Ashgate Publishing Group, Ashgate Limited, LTD, Ashgate Limited spelled out. Sometimes it actually matters. Sometimes it's like Bantam Books, Bantam Dell. You might say that's not quite the same publisher, and so you want to leave them separate. But sometimes you're like, no, for my purposes, it's the same thing. Wiley is an unholy mess. You actually, with Wiley, you probably have to double check and look under, see if there's anything under John Wiley, and then also look under W for Wiley as well. So this helps you very quickly see in a set of like over 15,000 rows, see all of the unique values. And then what you can do is come back to your main data and start using filter. So let me do a filter, and let me do a text filter on contains, and I want everything that contains Wiley. And if I take a quick look and say, okay, these are all the same Wiley as far as I'm concerned, now I can use some of my other tricks. I'm going to Command Shift down arrow to clean all of them out except the first one. And now click on the first one and use my autofill. Whoops, I don't know why it just did that. And now use my autofill. I have to get on the little square. Having trouble getting on my autofill square here. Oops. Somehow I'm suddenly having trouble with my, there it is. I can actually drag it too, because that row was giving me a hard time and I'm not happy about it. If you can't see my, oh, you guys can't see my mouse. Depending on how I mouse on that corner, I keep getting different icons and I keep getting the wrong one. So the other thing you can do, by the way, if you're having trouble with your mouse, if I just copy one cell and then I go down to the next one and I Command Shift down arrow to select them all, it's going way too far, but I can Control Command V. In that case, it didn't know where the bottom of my data was, so I went too far. But now now they're all Wiley. And if I come back to my sheet, and I'm probably going to have a ridiculous number because I went too far down. If I come back to my sheet and I right-click on this cell right here, this is where you find refresh. So refresh my pivot table, and now gone are all, should be gone, are all my John Wileys. Sorry, all my John Wileys are gone, and now all my variants down here. Up. And Wiley's now a ridiculous number because I overshot the bottom of my spreadsheet. Let's find where. Sometimes Excel does a very poor, this is one reason I like Google Sheets, by the way, because Google Sheets never does this to me. I have to figure out where the top of my data is and get rid of all the ones that I accidentally created that are too far down. Well, I'm not going to waste your time with this, but I'm going to just Command Shift down, delete. Delete, guys. Oh, it may be because it's so much it's now. Uh-oh, that was too much. It's not responding. Okay, so we're going to, while I'm waiting for that to respond, that's using a combination, and you could do it on sort or filter. I find filter with the search for text contains to be the best way to use a pivot table to clean things up. So while I'm waiting for my spreadsheet to recover from that mistake, I'm going to continue on. So that was a very simple pivot table on just a single column of text. But usually what you want to do is pivot on, it could be a column of text counting or summing up some other value, like price or usage or something like that. Or you might even want to do what's called a cross tabulation or crosstab, where rows are one thing and columns are another thing that you're then adding up the combinations of those. So if you're, and I'll show you that in a moment, if you're going to do a cross tabulation on variables, one of which, like LC class, is the whole alphabet plus lots of subsets of that. So you might have 50 or 100 of those, and your shelving location in your, if this is data from your catalog about your collections, and maybe you only have 10 different shelving or 10 that you care about for this purpose, you know, your stacks, your oversize, your reference, whatever. You want to make sure those are the one that has lots and lots of values, and the columns are the one that's not very many, because it's just hard to deal with scrolling sideways with columns. You can also, if you have only two variables like this, you can choose to have your data with both of those variables be the rows as a subdivision. Let me see, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to kill this. Don't save and open it, because I'm going to be opening up a different one anyway. And I'll show you what I'm talking about subdividing. You can also, within the pivot table, filter the rows if you only want to include certain values, because you're trying to make, because this is the great thing we're heading towards, is you're now going to make this nice summary table that you're then going to use with your charts and graphs and things. So sometimes you only want your chart or your graph to include certain values that are relevant to your purpose, so you can filter out. And you can also group rows of values to create subtotals. So for instance, if your goal is to show a collection of ebooks and you're trying to analyze a collection of ebooks from, say, EBSCO or ProQuest, one of the huge ones, and you really want to know how many of those books are older than 2000, right? So you don't want to see every single publication year as a separate row. You want everything pre-2000 added up and everything post-2000 added up. Or you might even want to do by decades. So you want the 1990s, the 1980s, the 1970s, and then everything older than 1970 added up, stuff like that. So you do that by grouping rows. And so let me go to my next slide before we go into more, actually demoing more of this. Why is it? Okay. You can also add, once you've got all that set up, you can also add multiple value columns to show the count and the sum and the average for all of those rows. And you can, and I'll show you editing some of these other kinds of things. So let me go to, because I've been talking about circulation data as a great example of ways of using this stuff. So I have a spreadsheet that I did an SQL query, because we have Evergreen, I can do SQL queries on my catalog, and I've pulled down, and I've already done some pre-cleaning up, so I've got my original sort order, and I've got my call numbers, and I've got my LC class. And I want to do, and this one, by the way, I had previously done a VLOOKUP on it, so I've combined, I've got my checkout data on how many times all these books have checked out. And so say I want to know what's happening by LC class in terms of checkouts. So I want everything between, even though I'm not going to use the ones in the middle, I want to make sure I have my checkout column and my LC class column. And now I go insert, pivot table. I've selected my column, so I can ignore all of that. I want my LC class to be my rows, and I want my checkouts to be my values. I don't want to count them, I want to sum them. So I value field settings, and I change this to sum. Okay. Now maybe I also want to count them. So let me do that again and say, okay, because what this is telling me is that for AC, I've got 534 books that have checked out a total of 78 times since my checkout data started, which for us is 2008. So then I could actually start adding my own columns. I could average that and things like that. Now, say I don't really want all the A's broken out. I want to group these into just all of the A's. So I select them, right click, oops, wait a minute. Sorry, clicked on the wrong thing. I don't want the entire rows, I just want the values. And I select them and I group. Now by default, it just called group 1, so I can change it up at the top to just the A's, or I'll just say A. And then I can collapse that with the little minus sign, and now I'm seeing all the A's added up together for the purpose of my data. So you can do that for whichever ones you want. It's usually a good idea to have them contiguous, as you saw, because the B's can be a bit of a problem. And by the way, the moment I did that, you'll notice I'm now starting to see every single other of the ones are getting these duplicate values. And I can, let's try to remember where to do this in Excel, because it's in a different place in Google. I can turn off the subtotal LC class 2. Oh, that wasn't it. Wait a minute. Oh, expand collapse. I want to collapse them all there. Okay. You can see, by the way, this is another way to find bad data, because apparently I've got my there's something wrong with how I extracted my LC classes somewhere, because I've actually got an LC class that is B1 dot, and there probably was a space or some bad character in there that I forgot to trim out to clean that up. You can see that happening with a few others. So anyway, so that's one way. Now I did mention you can also, let me go back to my data, you can also add another variable as a subdivided field. So I think this data might all be stacks, but suppose I have different locations in here. And since stacks location was included, if I put location in my rows, and now I've collapsed everything so you can't see it, but let me, now you can see my data broken down. So AC stacks, And those are all stacks. See if in this case, I think my original data set was all stacks. So, but if I had stacks and reference, I'd see them broken out. Stacks is this, reference this, and then subtotals. So that's the basics of pivots. Now, okay, if I wanted instead my location to be columns, I have to make sure I drop that above the values. So now I've got, so I do have oversized data. So I have oversized, it just didn't have it in the A's. So now I can see for, say, BJ, I have 2 that are oversized, and some of the checkouts, 2 checkouts from the oversized, 1 checkout from the stacks. There's a lot of cleanup that needs to be done in your column headings that you can do up at the top here when you select them. And oh, and I mentioned filtering, sorry. I want to come back to the row labels. Here is where you can filter specific values you want to just get rid of completely. So first of all, I want to get rid of blank. But I might also want to get rid of all, if I had a couple of rows of bad data, I might want to get rid of all these F6 and 7. Or I can use the filters in the same way we use filters in the other place. I can say, you know what? I don't want all of, I want to just say if it, let's do this. Well, since these should all just start with something. No, let me do this. Let's see, equals. You can actually do, usually you can do multiple criteria. If I say this, sorry, it's not giving me starts with. So I'm going to have to do this way. Turn it off if it's F, and say I want FC, and turn that off. I want just FC plus FA. Oh, no. Sorry, I apologize. I'm running into problems that I thought I had rehearsed this, but I'm confusing myself with Google Sheets. Google Sheets does this a lot better too. Google Sheets will let me do multiple filter combinations at once, and Excel's not going to let me do that. So anyway, if I turn off the select all, and let's say I just do all of the A's and all of the B's and BC's and B, and like say I wanted the, let's say makes more sense. Say I want the religious and philosophy stuff, but not the psychology stuff. Then I could go through, and I don't want the bad data, and I could go and say BH, BJ, BH, BJ, BL. Anyway, you get the idea. And now I'm only seeing the ones I want. Then the idea is that once you have this all, you've got the rows you want, you've got the columns you want, you've got whatever added up or counted up that you want. Now you can do something like you can copy all of this, open up a new tab, and do a paste special values only. Now you've got, and then you can clean up the headers and everything. Now you've got something you can really start doing some nice graphs and charts and data visualization on stuff. Oh, Allison is popping up a message. You can use Slicer in Excel pivots. Oh, Excel, I have not had a chance to learn how to do that in Excel. Thank you, Allison. Do you want to, since we have a little bit of time, do you want to tell me where to find Slicer? Suddenly. Allison, you can turn on your audio. We're a little unstable. Okay, that may be why I haven't learned it. But oh, by the way, I should mention, I think that was in one of my slides, the Slicer's in the pivot tab. Okay, in the pivot tab itself. So in insert here, insert pivot table. Let me come back to here. Insert pivot tables here. Anyway, I think we're gonna end up going off the rails if I try to follow that. So Allison, maybe you can like email me later.
There, it's over to the right. It's over to the right.
Oh, there you are.
Slicer timeline. It's under filters. I like if you go right over. There's symbols, text, link, Slicer. No, go back to where you were.
Under the home tab. Okay, under
whatever tab you were just on. And there's an option way over to the right. It says Slicer timeline.
Oh, okay. So it's in the insert tab. Sorry, there's no pivot tab. Okay, it's in Slicer. Huh. Oh God, this looks like it's about connections.
I think that's for potentially a later session.
Okay. Oh, so if you do Slicer when you're within the pivot table. Yeah, I think we need to do this maybe slicer within there we go. Slicer within pivot tables does some things. Okay, so we will save that for another lesson. Thank you, MSVU. So there are tons and tons more features that I couldn't spend time doing. We have a little bit of time, so I just want to go through back to my slides and make sure there was anything else that I wanted to show you. I think nope, that's the last slide. So actually, we can play around with this a little bit more. So let's see what happens if I do a slicer. If I do a slicer on LC class, what is that going to do? I'm really curious. Oh, does this make it easier to select them? I don't know what that's doing. Yep, okay. Let's see. Does anyone have a question? Okay, yeah. I'm definitely going down a rabbit hole here. I need to learn more about slicers. So I do not claim to know everything about Excel, but hopefully I've given you the control click for okay, right. So control click, control. I'm turning them off now. Okay. Anyway, thank you for that. Okay, so I recommend everybody play with that and maybe do some Googling. I'll bet there's some YouTube videos that are specifically how to use slicers with pivot tables. Oh, maybe Allison will do a session. Okay. But that's the basics of pivot tables. But you can see how you want to have done everything else that we covered. You want to get one row that's headers and nothing else. All your data straight, clean, all the way down to the bottom. You want to have all your data normalized. You want to do the VLOOKUP to bring in anything into the one table that you're going to want to pivot on, so it's all together. You just need to do all of those other steps and clean up with the clean and trim, so you don't have so pivot doesn't get confused about what it's combining into a single category. You just have to do all of that first, and then finally you're ready to do the pivot. So everything else was leading up to that. So is there any, since we do have some time left, this might be a good time to look at questions. So let's go all the way back and see where they're, oh, someone mentions using all the way back at using absolute, where was that? When I was talking about these things, absolute versus relative cell references, using F4 to add you call them anchors, yeah, that's fine. I always just type them in. I'm old school. Allison likes Excel tables, I know, because when she and I did our joint presentation at our workshop at DAPLA, she really used tables. Oh, if you use a table, it doesn't overshoot. Thank you. So my problem, Wiley, shooting down to 100,000 or more rows wouldn't have happened if I'd been using an Excel table. Thank you. So there's another good reason to convert your ranges into tables. And in a pivot, let's see, MSVU, once in a pivot table, you can extract the subset that corresponds to the row of the pivot table. You can, there's lots of stuff in the pivot tables that you can do once you're there. By the way, I also recommend always renaming, because Excel just keeps creating sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3. Just rename them as you go so you can keep track of what things are. So I tend to do things like, I'll call it my checkout pivot. Or if I'm trying to keep them short, I might do CO-P or something like that. But again, I highly recommend not having spaces. And having said that, I have a tab with spaces in it. Check out data for our Dell laptops. But try not to put spaces or any punctuation other than basic hyphens or underscores in the names of your tabs. Okay. All are discussing about slicers. So I don't see, we have our discussion about more advanced stuff with pivot tables. I don't see any questions about anything earlier. Is there anybody who would like me, let me just run back through, to go back through any of these other things? So some of the things I might have skipped over the first time through, because I wanted to make sure I got to pivot tables. Anything to do with ifs or if errors or anything like that? Oh no, index match, I'm not prepared for it. I'm sorry. I always have to look it up again every time I use it because it's a hideous syntax. Sorry, Google it. Yeah. Anything more about dates? Yeah, well, because I definitely skipped over one that I wanted to show you with dates. Fuzzy match. Oh yes. Okay. So, oh, and Cynthia, let me go just do the fuzzy. So there is, and I have a special spreadsheet set up in Science Direct related stuff. Here's my Science Direct Combine. Let me get that. I think that's the one I was playing around with fuzzy lookup in. So there's a plugin that you can install. So it doesn't come with Excel, but it's free and it's from Microsoft, so it's safe. Called Fuzzy Lookup. Let me get back to my raw data here. Actually, what I want to be in, this is not a good spreadsheet to be in. I want to be in one that you would be doing a VLOOKUP on, except that you don't have any decent numeric field to match on, and you've got to match on title. You just don't have a choice. Actually, let me think for a moment. I think I had a better example of that with, let's see. Oh, yes, ebooks. So what I'm going to do is, and this one might be a real useful choice for people as a specific example. So I have as you most of you probably know, both EBSCO and ProQuest offer a Canadian ebook collection for purchase or subscription. And I've just recently got, thank you, Cynthia, for ProQuest, the current title list, the recent title list. This is the title list. I have to enable editing for the ProQuest ebook Canadian collection and then I've also got, wait a minute, that's the EBSCO one. My Windows, for some reason, my Windows want to keep bouncing over to my other screen. So, okay, so there's the EBSCO one, and there's the ProQuest one. And I found when I started doing traditional VLOOKUP that some titles would match between the two vendors on ISBN. I don't know anybody who's been playing around with trying to match ISBNs across different vendors, or frankly within ProQuest, even the same vendor with different kinds of reports, that the ISBNs, neither the print nor eISBN match at all. It's like they're all inventing their own eISBNs for their separate platforms, and I don't know what versions of the print ISBNs they're all choosing to use, but so sometimes you actually have to do a match on title. So what fuzzy lookup is, and this is something I've already done, is you first of all, you must have your data in tables. So let me go back, and I actually don't do this enough, so I have to go back and look at my instructions for tables. So to convert to table, home styles, format as table or control L, and Allison is probably cringing right now because she's got this memorized. So home styles, format as table, and I don't care about the shading. It's making sure it's got all my columns selected, and my table has headers. Yes, okay. So yay, so that one's now a table. So now I'm going to shrink this a little bit so I can get to both tables back and forth. Okay, so here's the second one. Got to do the same thing with the second one. Format as table. Slide over, make sure it's got the whole thing. It does, and the table as headers. There we go. Okay, so now they're both formatted as tables. Now I can do, actually I just realized I have to copy the one over to the other file, and I think I might have already done that with the other one. Let me go. Nope, I haven't. So now I have to copy the tab over so they're both in the same file. So I'm going to copy the ProQuest one over to the EBSCO one and create a copy. And the ProQuest one has, so I'm going to rename them so I can keep this. This is the P one, and this is the E one. And by the way, the table is now called Table 1. I'm going to call it the E table, which is up here in the corner. And just sort of click off that. And my P1, I'm going to call my P table. Okay, so now I'm ready to do a fuzzy lookup. So I have to pay attention to which columns I want to look up. So it's the title column in P, and it's in the title, which is actually, it's column B in both. Good. Fuzzy lookup, here we go. Left column is P, right column is E. That's, oh, I have to, before I start this, I have to decide where I want it to all go. So I'm going to make another tab. And so with that selected in the new tab, column, I want table P, table E, and I match up. And it's actually trying to judge for me. I want to match on the title in the first column, and where is title in the second column. So title in column is like P and E. So left table, right table. This really should say left table, right table. So title in P, title in E, match them up. And it just added this line here. Now I have to decide what output columns I want to. By default, it's going to give me all of the columns from both tables. I could turn some of those off if I want. For now, I'll just leave them all in. And the fuzzy lookup similarity is the one that's going to give me the rating at the end. Now because fuzzy lookup is a logic where it attempts to match the things that are close, text strings that are close but not quite perfectly, I have to decide how much I want to count as a match. And I want to make it really high. I want to say like at least 0.8 out of a 1.0 is a perfect match. 0 is no match at all. So I don't want it to give me similar sounding titles that have, 3 out of the 4 words the same, but the 4th is a totally different word unless it's like the. So 0.8 is, you play with this for yourself, see what you like. I like 0.8. And then I say go. And let's see how long this is going to take. So it's working on it, and it's going to give me all those columns across both spreadsheets, and this could end up taking a long time. And what I'm going to end up with is in that empty spreadsheet, in that empty tab, that empty sheet, is all the P columns plus all the E columns that matched with a fuzzy lookup, and the very last column is going to give me the numeric rating of how close a match it was. And then I can rearrange the columns as I like to eyeball for myself, especially any of them that are not a 1.0. I could like sort or filter and find the ones that are not a 1.0 match, and then decide for myself which of those I consider to be matches. And then whatever it is I want to do with the rest of this data. And you might want to do this in both directions. So P to E is going to give me all the P ones, showing me the E ones, that's the ProQuest ones, and showing me the EBSCO ones that match. If I then did another fuzzy lookup in another tab, I might want to make E table 1 and P table 2 to find all the EBSCO ones that do or don't have a match. Obviously, the ones that match are going to be identical in both, but that's a way of finding all the P ones that don't have an E match and the E ones that don't have a P match by doing it twice in reversing which one is table 1 and which one is table 2. So.
Melissa?
Yes.
While we're waiting for this to progress, yeah. Helen had a question about importing. When you import data into basically into a file, do you know the?
See the total amount.
Oh, there we go.
So when you mean during the process of importing, or do you mean like at the very end?
I think she means at the very beginning when you're bringing the file in. Like the data file into Excel?
Oh, well, if you open it up directly, you don't. I think if you do the import, use it. Well, and so while we're waiting for this, let me see. I don't know if Excel is going to be able to cope with my opening up something entirely separate. Let me go ahead and open up. I'm going to run a fresh Excel. Give me a moment. I'm going to open a fresh Excel with an empty workbook, and it may be really slow because I've got the other thing going. Nope. Okay. So while that other thing is running, here's Excel with an empty workbook. Now here's if I do the data, get data from text or CSV, and I'll do. I tend to name my TSV files TSV, and Excel can't find TSV, so I have to switch to all files to find something that actually has a TSV, or I could just use this one.
Well, there's one right below it is TSV.
Yeah, but that's my combined one. That's an example of one that's a lot of trouble. So let me use because some people were interested in the library H3LP metadata, so let me use that one because I hadn't had a chance to show that one yet. You notice that? Please wait while we establish a connection. And I have not yet figured out how to break that connection. So the moment you start bringing it in this way, you've now got this invisible connection between this spreadsheet and that CSV file. So, okay, so I think here, let's see, based on the entire data set, let's see, if I base it on the entire data set, will it let me? It's showing me the ID numbers, it's not showing me line numbers. So I'm not sure. If someone else knows a way to do this, jump in on the chat and tell us, because I don't know how to do it. Here's how it looks when you import it this way. You can just hit load, or you can go, this is 2016, depends on which version you're on. If you go into edit, and it opened something up on my other screen, so let me bring it over. You're into this whole complicated query thing, and here's where you can start doing this. Choose columns, remove columns, choose rows, remove rows. Change the data type one column at a time. You can say that by default it wants that to be text. I could try to change it to something else before I finish importing it. And this is how you set it all up. Those of you with earlier versions of Excel, which frankly I'm used to looking at, it was a lot simpler than this. It didn't open up an entire query editor to do this. It would just let you very quickly, all the columns would say general, general, general at the top, and you could pick them one at a time and change the data type of them. But here it looks like, I don't know, is it going to let me see? It looks like it's going to do one of those annoying scroll things. I don't know. That might be all. That might be showing me all my data. I have to check and see if this data set really is 213. Keep my changes, sure. And here comes my data. Did I really have 213? Yeah, looks like I did. So yeah, it looks like during the import process, if you go that way, that and you go into the edit function so that you can control how the columns come in as what data type, then yes, it gives you a chance to see the actual rows. And so you can see the count on them. And by the way, this is what I meant earlier when I said if you do it this way, you'll notice it turned this whole thing into a table. I've got my table tools open. I've got a table name, which you probably want to simplify. So there you have it. I'm gonna go check on the other thing, see if it finished. Oh, did it finish? Yeah, looks like it finished. Okay, so let me close my fuzzy lookup. So here's the results of the fuzzy lookup. What I may want to do is hide a whole bunch of columns. I didn't even talk about this, I guess. So you can hide, by the way, hiding and filtering do not in any way affect pivot tables. They just hide how you're looking at your raw spreadsheet. So this is because I started with P, so there's my ProQuest title, there's my EBSCO title, and if I was trying to combine data from some of these other things, let me hide some more columns here. And there's my similarity ratio. So scroll that back. So you can see ProQuest had a big subtitle attached, EBSCO didn't, and that gave it a similarity of 0.8667. Boxhead and Boxhead with brackets and Boxhead without brackets had a 0.9. You can see what kind of this is also giving us the zeros are telling us the ones that were in the first table that had no match at all that met my similarity threshold. So I can by filtering or sorting on the similarity column and finding just the zeros, I'll find all the ones that are in ProQuest but not EBSCO. And again, I would redo that with the two tables backwards. I'd redo the fuzzy lookup to find all the zeros to find the ones that didn't. So that's how fuzzy lookup works. Surprised that 121 Express is not. I wonder if there might be some hidden spaces in there somewhere. I don't know why it didn't think 121 Express is. No, I can't find any hidden. There might be a hidden. This is why clean and trim can sometimes help. Even you can't see. There may be some kind of unprintable character in one but not the other that it picked up on to give it a 0.93, because otherwise I can't explain that. So that's an example where when you cannot, especially between vendors, you cannot count on any numeric column being reliably the same, then you use fuzzy. And again, if you just Google Microsoft Excel fuzzy lookup and make sure you follow the link that's the actual official Microsoft.com site, you'll find where you can install the plugin that does this, that adds this section. Okay, it's 12:02. You are all, so I'm going to be sharing all these spreadsheets, and I zipped them up before I started messing with them here. So the presentation is in a PDF format. That plus the zip file of all my sample spreadsheets we'll be sharing on the CAAL site. You are all welcome to email me with follow-up questions. I'm happy to be up to any reasonable point. You're a little private consultant. If you wanted to like send me a spreadsheet you're working on and say, can you figure out how to do XYZ in my spreadsheet, then I'd be very happy to help you with that. So, oh, thank you very much, Suzanne. I think we're done. I'm going to turn off the recording now. Is there any last minute anything, Cynthia or anybody, before I turn off the recording?
No, just I'll send everybody, since everybody RSVP'd, and the groups I can RSVP whoever the contact was, email or whoever the contact was. But once the recording and everything is up on the CAAL site, I'll send a message out to everybody to say, hey, everything's up, go to it. So just to let you know, it will be put up in the near future.
Okay, great. I'm going to turn off the recording now.